Hi, welcome to Box on the Box, Rock and Celluloid, Bok for short. I'm Edward Box. So I'm going to rank those AC/DC albums. Now there's 17 of them. There's 18 because there's the two releases of the same album. There's also a couple of ones we can put in there, so let's make it a straight 20. I'm going to start off with my least favourite one. Is actually the original Australian version of High Voltage. So just going to look at the tracks on this. I think the problem with this album is it's kind of like one of those albums. It doesn't really always sound like AC/DC. Soul Strip is a really good track. You'll know She's Got Balls, but there's a song on it called Love Song Oh Gene, and if you heard that, you'd never know. You think it was one of Bon Scott's other bands. There's quite a lot of the kind of Slade glam rock influence on this album, which isn't great. Like Showbiz is You Ain't Got Hold on Me, Stick Around. Then you've got Little Lover, which you might be familiar with, which is okay. But it just doesn't. It's kind of like in one of those albums, like the first Judas Priest album, the first Saxon album, which I think actually better than this. You know, it just doesn't. It's arrived very, very badly formed, really. So that's my number 20 choice. My number 19 choice is Fly on the Wall. Going over to the discography here. So this is I think I did a thing on AC/DC a while ago. And I kind of liked this a bit more at the time, but when I've been listening to it recently, it's got, the guitar sound's got quite a lot of distortion by AC/DC standards to start off with. Brian's buried in the mix with some god-awful reverb, but he sounds like he's been gargling with tacks. You can barely make out what he's saying. He's really screechy. He makes Tom Kiefer sound like Steve Perry. But I think the main problem with this is it's just, the production. It's AC/DC once they left Mutt Lang, they couldn't really work out how to use reverb after that. And there's a period where they're kind of putting reverb on things and it's just not quite right. And this is the worst example. But Shake Your Foundations and Stand Up are pretty catchy. I think it's fair to say AC/DC have never made a terrible album. There's always one or two or three or four tracks quite often that are pretty good. And I still think this has got some good songs in it. I think with Simon Wright coming in, he's a little more kind of on top of the beat than Phil Rudd, and that's where the feel's been lost. So number 18, probably no surprise here, it's Blow Up Your Video. This is the follow-up to it. About all you can say is, well, they got Van and Young back, and it's improving things. I think Heat Seeker's a really good track. They could bring that back live. Really catchy. That's the way I want to rock and roll's okay. Then you've got Two's Up, which is kind of almost a power ballad. I mean, the last time they did something like that was kind of Let Me Put My Love Into You, I think. Means to Go Zone's quite good. I'd give it a 4 out of 10. It's got some good tracks. I saw them on this tour, and it was a great show. But it just doesn't, everything from the album artwork, it's just DC in trouble in hair metal land, that's the weird thing, a lot of bands like this had trouble in the 90s, but AC/DC can have trouble in the 80s, because other bands came and copying the sound. Okay, so number 7, I'm going for Rock or Bust. So let's just get this up. So this is the different album came out, Malcolm was ill, who passed away shortly after, I think. The one thing with this is I think the production, the sound's better than Black Ice, but the songs just simply aren't there. Rock or Bust catching enough. I think Play Ball at 2 minutes and 47 was really, really fun track. Emission Control I quite liked. Maybe Hard Times, not sure, maybe Misadventure. Or Rock the Blues Away, yeah. There's definitely 4 or 5 tracks again. AC/DC did this quite often. The whole album's not really bad. Would I give this a 5 out of 10? Yeah, probably would. But coming off the back of Black Ice, just not as good, but you can see there's a lot of problems around this time. So that's my number 17. My number 16 choice, and maybe I've put this higher. I think it lacks really kind of definitive songs, but what I do like about it is this sort of authentic bluesy sound they've got. This is probably my favourite sounding AC/DC record in this period. It's Stiff Upper Lip I'm talking about. Can't Stand Still, just that really nice pick guitar part. You can really hear the Marshalls, the kind of really natural sound of the Marshalls. Very little distortion on, it's just kind of natural drive, a kind of almost glassy sheen you get when you hear a Marshall, up close, and it's got that there. I just think there's too many tracks in it. It just kind of lacks a bit of memorability, but I do think Brian's vocals are good. This is the most Stonesy the band have sounded. So again, with this, heading into better waters, let me cross over again. So my next choice is the Razor's Edge. Again, this might be controversial because people might have this higher. I think the reason why people have this album higher, or think it's better than it is, this is just my opinion, is because of Thunderstruck. This album had Thunderstruck and it sold 5 million copies in the US. So after a lean period in the 80s where DC were just going platinum with Flick of the Switch, Fly on the Wall and Blow Up Your Video, they broke out with this. They got Bruce Fairbairn in. It's a good sounding record. I think Chris Slade's drums have a better feel than Simon Wright's, but it's still not got the Rudd feel. But I'm not massive on Thunderstruck, but they came up with an anthem that they've played at every gig since then. That's fair enough. Money Talks is pretty catchy, as is Fire Your Guns, and the title tracks is good. So the first 4 tracks is good, but then you've got Mistress for Christmas and Rock Your Heart Out. Are You Ready, Strange, Who Are We? It's kind of got that glam rock thing, going back to those the High Voltage and before, when DC is still trying to find their sound, kind of influenced by Slade and the British glam rock of that era. So yeah, I'm not massive on this album. Again, it's a 4 or 5 out of 10 to me, but it has got some good tracks. So on to the next one. We are up to number 14, and I'm going for Ball Breaker. So this is the album where they team up with Rick Rubin and Mike Fraser's engineering, so that's good. This has got some good tracks. Hard as a Rock, Cover You in Oil, yeah. The Fuhrer, Burning Alive's good. Hail Caesar, Ball Breaker, the title track. Again, they've got a slightly rawer sound on this. There's a little less polish. I think that's good. Angus and Malcolm writing the tracks, not Brian doing the lyrics. This album did pretty well. I think it did about 2 million. I think people liked the slightly rawer sound. Again, lacking in a classic sort of track. They don't really get played again, these. Maybe I'd stretch to a 6 out of 10 on this. Certainly a 5. So that's my number 14 choice. So my number 13 is my first wild card, and it's AC/DC Live. So it came out in 1992. This captured the band sort of in their kind of resurrection with the Razor's Edge album. They did a really famous, brilliant Donington show in 1991. The Razor's Edge album did very well. They hadn't done a live album with Brian, and this has got tracks recorded different parts of the world, but quite a lot in England. But I think it's got a good energy. In the 90s and the late 80s are a kind time for live albums, and I think this is one of the live albums that kind of stands out. Did pretty well. I think it went triple platinum or double platinum from obviously that, because it's a double album, it counts twice. And it's a legitimate live album. Typically when bands do live albums now, they'll film a DVD and then put out the CD of the concert. Back then, bands would record a live album, and yeah, maybe they put out a video, but the live album was the first port of call. Now it's the DVD or the Blu-ray, and the CD's a thing after. So this is, it's a live album proper, and one of the better ones from that era, and does the Brian era justice. So that's my wild card at number 13. At number 12, I'm just going back into the discography, so it's Power Up. So one of the pleasant surprises about COVID was, AC/DC coming back with an album. I think Brendan O'Brien found the sweet spot with this in terms of the sound. He had the bit more distortion on the guitars that he found with Rock or Bust, and a little more punch on the drums. I thought Black Ice was a little kind of weaker sounding, so he kind of blended the two. Quite like the album artwork after the crap cover of Rock of Bust and Black Ice. I mean, it was quite funny. Probably the best AC/DC album cover in years, since Highway to Hell. Pretty striking. 12 tracks. I think that's always been a bit of a flaw for DC for some reason ever since Razor's Edge. They've put 12 tracks on an album or more. It'd be better if they trimmed it, but I do think it's decent. Realise Rejection's very catchy, Shot in the Dark, Through the Mists of Time's got a nice Celtic sort of thing. Witch's Spell as well, Demon Fire Rocks, No Man's Land, Money Shot, Code Red. I think this is a pretty solid record. I think I'll give it a 7 out of 10. And it's nice to see DC, after sort of trials and tribulations, getting that classic Back in Black album, Back in Black lineup together and making a solid and respectable record. And I think it is. And that brings us to what's just picture, which is Black Ice. So this really was a comeback. I think this is one of the last hurrahs of rock music in terms of the music I grew up on, being able to shift a lot of units. This sold about 7-8 million copies worldwide. Proper physical sales. It's just not going to happen again, that. And there's been a big 8-year gap. They had the multiple covers. I think a lot of younger people got into DC on this, and the band were able to sell a lot of back catalogues, still of CDs in this era. But Rock and Roll Train's a sort of modern classic. I think they might still play that live. Skies on Fire's decent. Big Jack's really good. Anything Goes very good. War Machine, catchy. Smash and Grab, Swallowing for a Fright, not as good. Quite like Wheels. Decibel's really good. Stormy Mayday, I like the kind of bluesy quality of that. She's like Rock and Roll. Money Made, pretty good. Good lyric. Rock and Roll Dream, I do like that. It's just, could have not come up with a better title. Rock and All the Way. Well, how many songs should have rock in the title? But then it finishes with Black Ice. There's definitely 6 really good cuts on this, and about another 3 deep cuts. It's easy as 6 or 7 out of 10, like Power Up. I'm just picking this because it kind of came first, I think. I prefer it if it had a kind of rock or bus sound with a bit more punch on the guitar and drums, but a really good comeback album for me. So next at number 10 is Flick of the Switch. This is a real cult favourite with Franz. They get back with the Albert Brothers. Actually, BC produced themselves. I think George is involved though. This really doesn't do very well for them. Makes number 15 in the US. But what it lacks is a classic track. I think Guns of Fire comes close. But what it does have is a series of strong tracks and a really good raw sound. Phil Rudd still plays the drums on this, even though he left, was booted out after the recording. But Rising Power, Flick of the Switch, Nervous Shakedown, Landslide are really good. I mean, This House is on Fire is okay. Gun for Hire, I've said, is great. Deep in the Hole, Bedlam in Belgium, good fun. Badlands, and Brain Shake really kicks some ass. Definitely a 7 out of 10, I think. It's just missing that signature track. And that's the reason I've picked this one ahead, which is, of course, For Those About to Rock. I think it's that thing. I mean, people kind of can be critical For Those About to Rock album, Flick of the Switch. But AC/DC had a run of amazing albums, basically from the TNT European International Edition of High Voltage, all the way through. This just had signature tracks. And then in High Power Age, Highway to Hell, Black and Black, If You Want Blood, they made some of the greatest rock ever. So, you can forgive them really making 2 pretty decent albums after that. If you look through the history of bands, it's very rarely they can just keep repeating it. But this has got, obviously, For Those About to Rock is the signature track, to still play it, classic. Put the Finger on You's good, Let's Get It Up, really nice sort of Stonesy. And then you got Inject the Venom, which I think's a good track. Snowball, less so. Evil Walks, really like it. Evil Walks Behind You. Care of the Devil, COD, really good. Just Keep On Breaking the Rules. Another good track. Night of the Long Night is alright. And then finishing with a real gem, I think, Spellbound. Quite an atmospheric track. Moody. A little more ballady vibe. It's interesting when DC do that with a good vocal by Bran. The straw that broke the camel's back on his arm was Mutt Lang pissing around trying to get a drum sound in the warehouse for 3 weeks, and the band just kind of fell out with him over that. The snare is enlarged quite a bit on this album, and it's on the cusp of being okay, but it's getting to that point where it's too big for the AC/DC sound, but that's why he went to Def Leppard, Okay, so our next choice might be a bit of a shock to people. It's Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. This has got classic tracks on this album. I just don't think it's a classic album. Obviously, it's a mixture. You got Australian release and American release, I think. So an international version, I should have ranked them separately, really. Anyway, I'm broken my rules on her. But Dirty Deeds is great. It's an absolute classic. Love at First Feel's pretty good. Big Balls is funny. Rockers, obviously, a bit of a live favourite, a lot of fun. And Problem Child, great track, and that'd appear again. There's been some rocking. It's alright, Ain't No Fun, Went Around to Be a Millionaire. Not really in terms, but Ride On is one of the great DC deep cuts. I know, You know, a lot of fans will love that track. And then of course Squealer, which is really un-PC lyrics, but I've always loved that as a kid. So that's my choice there. Next up is High Voltage, the international version. So this is basically an amalgamation of High Voltage, the original, and TNT. I think It's a Long Way to the Top, Rock and Roll Singer, The Jack, Live Wire, that's sad one. I've never really liked The Jack. The other tracks are great. TNT, classic. Quite like Can I Sit Next to You, Girl. It's a bit jolly. Little Lover's alright. She's Got Balls are alright, quite good fun. And High Voltage, of course, a really classic track. So I've already produced songs on this that are staples of the live environment. The next choice is the album that's mostly called from. It's TNT. So this is actually an album I've never owned, but it's just marginally better than the international version of High Voltage. You got It's a Long Way to the Top, Rock and Roll Singer, The Jack, Live Wire. The side one of the High Voltage is exactly the same. But you've got Rocker on this, and then Schoolhouse, you covered Chuck Berry, and I just think it's just probably a fraction better. And it's pretty amazing when you think about it, like Judas Priest and, you know, Saxon and bands like that, with their second album, AC/DC created classic tracks like, you know, TNT, High Voltage, It's a Long Way to the Top. They're, you know, DC staples. Okay, so my next choice is number 5. It's Let There Be Rock. I probably might have had this higher a while ago. I do think it's a great record. I think the production tuning issues on the guitar, sometimes the capturing of the band isn't as it should be, but you can't follow the tracks. Go Down and Dog Eat Dog are the two tracks that people wouldn't know very well, and they open it and they're really good. Then you got Let There Be Rock and Bad Boy Boogie. Don't need any introduction. Bad Boy Boogie's great. Overdose, really good. And Helena Bastard Police to Be, A Whole Lot of Rosie, and of course the international version puts Problem Child on. Now the Australian version has Crapsody in Blue. I'm not that fussed with that track. But Overdose is really good. So it's just a great record. I think the live versions of these songs are better, some of the classic ones, and we'll come to that. And that's why, you know, maybe, you know, we maybe reach for other ones before it. Which brings me to number 4. This is a tough one. I'm going for Back in Black. Doesn't need an introduction. The best recorded and mixed rock album ever made, I think, or one of them. If you go to a concert, the sound guy, you know, the last thing they do is play Back in Black for the PA, checking if the balance is there. Amazing what Brian did coming in. I'm not going to get the controversy of whether Bon wrote lyrics or not, but it opens Hell's Bells, Shoot the Thrill, What You Do for Money, Honey. Brilliant. And in Hell's Bells and Shoot the Thrill, I mean, they're just like two of the greatest DC tracks ever. Given the Dog a Bone was a track I really liked when I was younger. I like it less so now, but Let Me Put My Love Into You is a track I love more now. I think that's such a great song. Bam, 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 down. Great use of the cymbals and accent there. Side terms with Back in Black. Yeah, we hear it all the time. It's a fantastic track. You Shook Me All Night Long. It's not my favourite DC track, but it shows like their ability to craft a radio hit, you know, nice Stonesy sort of vibe. You know, so you can't fault that. Every band needs a track like this, you know, if you're going to shift albums, and they did a great job. Then another one of the all-time classic deep cuts by DC, Have a Drink on Me. What a track. Then Tails a little bit with Shake a Leg and Rock and Roll Like Noise Pollution. But Rock and Roll Noise Pollution's grown on me over the years. I feel this album's a classic album. It's one of the most important rock records ever made. But it's kind of an 8 out of 10. It's not all gold standard. So my next choice is If You Want Blood, You Got It. So this is a live album. Okay, I could do without the Jack, but the versions of some of the tracks on this, like Bad Boy Booze, and Angus just did, the version of Let There Be Rock, the version of A Whole Lot of Rosie. It's just, it captures the band. You know, AC/DC, one of the few bands you could argue are better live than on record. Just incredible energy, incredible punch. And this album, you know, it's that thing where it's that weird thing you get the single live albums like Unleashed in the East, and although you want more, it's great just having that, just that bit. just an absolute classic, one of the all-time great live albums, in that era of great live albums, Unleashing Live and Dangerous, all that. So that would be the album I would reach for. So no surprises for what the last two are. It just depends what order. Number 2, I'm going for Highway to Hell. Not quite as well recorded as Back in Black, but still fucking magically sounding. Contains probably my favourite AC/DC song of all time, which is Touch Too Much. And that's such a different track, I think. When you think about what DC sound like, they never really did a touch too much before or after, but it feels totally DC, but then kind of totally different from them. But Highway to Hell, Girls Got Rhythm, Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, Being Around the Bush, and what a great side one. Shot Down in Flames, one of my other great DC tracks. Really funny lyrics, some of my favourite Bond lyrics. Get It Hot, actually, really nice Stonesy groove on that. If You Want Blood, another great DC deeper cut that I've been playing it live recently. Love Hungry Man, probably the one track on the album that just lets it down. It's like, the album's 41 minutes, they could have left that off probably, it's alright. And then you finish with Night Prowler, a dark and brooding track, and of course Bond does Nanu Nanu at the end. So my number 1 is, it's kind of become the fan cliche for old school DC fans, it's Power Age. This is an album I didn't have when we were younger. My brother used to buy the DC albums on cassette and vinyl. For some reason we didn't have this one. I think that's why it's become a favourite, because I didn't know it as well. Every time I listen to it, it kind of feels fresh. But I think what really stands out on this is, after the sort of production tuney sort of things that went on Let There Be Rockin' before, the Band and Young team just really captured DC in a purest, rawest form. You got littered with great lyrics by Bon. And, it kind of starts off with the weakest track, Rock and Roll Damnation, which is a track I like. But it's, it's kind of more popular. Give Me a Bullet, brilliant track. Down Playment Blues, absolutely one of the greatest AC/DC songs ever. Gone Shooting, fucking brilliant. Riff Raff, again, phenomenal. Even better on If You Want Blood. Sin City, amazing. Then 2 really deeper cuts, Up to My Neck in You and What's Next to the Moon, but really good. And then it finishes with Kicks in the Teeth, which just kicks ass. Now, the original European release has Cold Hearted Man on. The Australian US release doesn't. And now we get the CD over here, it doesn't. But Cold Hearted Man is a good track as well. And that put the album, into about 40 minutes. I wish DC had just sorted out their international and their other versions. I don't know. But anyway, that is my favourite DC album of all time. I think it's one of those nearly perfect albums. Okay, so that is my ranking of AC/DC 17 studio albums, plus 1 and the 2 live albums. And I've kind of cheated, really, because, I should have looked at the other international versions, really. But anyway, remember, share and subscribe, and I'll see you again.